Hello, welcome to History in Lowell. I'm Maritza Grooms. I'm here with my buddy Bob Forrant, and we're here with our very special buddy, Lianna Kushi of E4All, the Executive Director of E4All Lowell Lawrence. Yes, welcome, Lianna.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, yes. So we're excited because we always talk about immigrant and refugee history on the History of Lowell, because obviously that's what makes our community so vibrant and beautiful. But we're going to talk about it in terms of business. Yes, it's going to be really cool because that's what E4All is all about, right? Uplifting
Yes.
marginalized voices and making sure that they can run their own businesses. Entrepreneurship for all. Exactly.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that and we'll dive in.
Sure. So we like at E4All, we like to say we help turn dreams into businesses. So we run a business program that helps people actually launch a business. We have classes, we do mentorship. It's called an accelerator because the idea is we're accelerating them. And we got started with this program at the end of 2012 and had our first cohort complete the program in the beginning of 2013. And so you think we're in 2020 now, that's 7 years. We run the program twice a year. We've done the program 14 times and helped launch over 215 businesses. And those are concentrated in Lowell, Lawrence, and the surrounding communities. So we really are open for all. So, we have people who started a business in Chelmsford or in Methuen, and also, many in Lawrence and many in Lowell.
I always find it intriguing to think about this because so much of the earlier history, and again, sometimes people don't realize it, a lot of the way when immigrants first came into Lowell, they made their way first by working in the mills, working at jobs that weren't necessarily what they wanted to do. They had come from a place maybe where they even operated a business or somebody in their family did, but they couldn't figure out a way to generate the money to do it. And as I understand what you're doing, you're actually like taking that, when you say turn dreams into a reality, you're taking that skill set that people a lot of times bring with them, and then turning it into a business in many ways like immigrants would have done in the 19 teens and 20s, 120 years ago in Lowell.
Exactly. And I think one of what's been so interesting to see is I think, immigrant communities have these really strong networks and they help each other, right? And so you'll even find that there's certain types of businesses that, many immigrant communities will run because they've learned from each other and they know how to open that type of business, like a nail salon or a barber shop, so they can teach someone else how to do that. And so our hope too is we're connectors and we help someone access an even broader network. And so from the mentorship or the education, it's also access to like, who would I talk to at the city if I want to open my business? Who would I talk to? What banks exist? What, all of those kind of network things that someone might need and might know nothing about, we can help them with that too.
Wow, yeah. And I think in my mind, I'm thinking very specifically of Market Street and a lot of the immigrant businesses that were open there in the past, in the far past, and how they got started. And I think you definitely need money. You definitely need a network. And Bob, maybe you can help me out with this. If they're working in the mills, how do they go from, working like that into owning their own business? How did that happen back then?
So sometimes in the late 19th, early 20th century, people would, an immigrant group in a neighborhood would support each other. So if somebody actually had the idea for starting some sort of enterprise, people might pool their money and help people. A lot of immigrant communities, when they first arrived in Lowell or any place else in the US or Canada or wherever people might have ended up, they relied on the community, as Lianna said earlier. And even for things like being buried, people didn't have money to get buried. And so people would pool their money. And out of the idea of doing that, ultimately we get something like what becomes Jeanne d'Arc Credit Union, which got its start that way in the French Canadian community because banks actually viewed French Canadian immigrants as flight risks because it was fairly easy to go back to Canada. And so a lot of local banks wouldn't lend money because they felt like people would take the money and basically run, which wasn't the case, but it was the stereotype of the community. And so people said, all right, then we have to do this for ourselves. And out of that came, that sort of entrepreneurial sort of spirit. And initially, and again, maybe Lianna, in terms of the businesses that you're working with, the history says lots of the early businesses filled gaps in immigrant communities, like a barber shop or like a bakery or a sort of down-home kitchen kind of a food place where you could get local food, or an importer, like a lot of Greek markets on Market Street imported olives and coffee and whatever from Greece. And I'm wondering, are you seeing the same thing with what you're doing now, and at least to some degree?
Yeah, I think we're seeing kind of a combination of things. So I think there are examples of that, like people who are making something in their home and realize that they can do more than just serve it within their community, kind of under the table. They can actually, become an official business and maybe even grow it beyond their community. And I think we do see a lot of sort of the 1.5 generation immigrant individuals coming through our program. So, everyone knows where to go to get your Brazilian chocolates, your brigadeiros. But now we have a woman in Lowell who thinks that these beautiful, delicious chocolates might appeal beyond the Brazilian community. And she sees an opportunity where she can package them pretty and market them and create a huge following on Instagram. And next thing you know, she's at farmers markets selling them to any Lowellian or beyond in other farmers markets, because people are really curious and they want to try new things and they're just delicious. And who doesn't want a sample free chocolate? But one thing too that we've seen, I'd say, with thinking about banks like Jeanne d'Arc Credit Union or their credit union, is because they have this community-based history, it's been so beneficial for us and the entrepreneurs we work with, because they understand the community, they employ folks from the community. So when our entrepreneurs are starting businesses, they really trust those relationships. And we've just seen how important that is, particularly now during the pandemic. And when the SBA came out with what's called the Payroll Protection Program, the PPP loan, which probably many people heard about, there's been a lot of research and data that shows that Black and brown entrepreneurs and immigrant entrepreneurs were less likely to access those loans or those resources. Another one is Emergency Disaster Loan, EIDL. And we found that our entrepreneurs who banked with local banks or credit union, Jeanne d'Arc, for example, they were able to get those loans. But if they were banking with, say, a big corporate bank, they may not have those established relationships to get considered to apply to that loan, because they don't even know who to go to. Whereas, here they know to talk to Kara, or they know to talk to John, or, these people locally.
Wow. That also makes me think of just how vital, right? We're talking about how immigrants and refugees and the Black and brown community give back to where they are, right? And so during this pandemic, I'm wondering, having everybody at home, have people gotten more creative with wanting to start a business? Has there been any kind of boom in that because we're all home? So maybe, I have this idea, now is the time. Have you seen anything like that happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we've seen two things happen. I think one is exactly what you're describing, is people who are feeling this is an opportunity to pursue something they've always wanted to pursue. And we have been able to capture some of those people to participate in our program. And the other thing is connected to it, but it's actually, as a result of the pandemic, so many people have lost their jobs and are losing their jobs that they have no choice but to start a business. And so like what we may call is like an entrepreneur of necessity, like in order for them to survive and pay their bills, especially if there's no longer a pandemic unemployment assistance, like they have to start a business. So if they don't figure this out, like they won't be able to pay their bills. So we, as staff at E4All or mentors at E4All feel even more a sense of urgency to support them to build a sustainable business. And we are seeing that. And also traditionally at E4All, we only work with people who are in the early stages or the idea phase of their business. But because of the pandemic and things have just dramatically changed so much, we're open to working with a business who has to just rethink their whole business and find a whole new customer. You know, if they no longer can be a storefront or kind of a traditional business, we want to work with them to help them figure out what's the next iteration of their business.
I mean, one of the things in the history of Lowell, the research that I've done over the years, a lot of people got their start by buying a 3-family home somewhere like on Market or Merrimack or Middle Street or Central, living above, and then maybe having grandparents or uncles or aunts living above them still for childcare and whatever, and they ran their business on the bottom floor. You see anything like that? Is there any sort of thing like that? And maybe not so much like a triple decker anymore, since so many of those have been taken down in Lowell, unfortunately, but that sort of family sort of blending of skill sets and time and energy, do you see that repeating itself in a way in the current day?
We do. And actually, the way we see it with E4All is 70% of the entrepreneurs that come through our program are women. And so actually a big reason of why they're starting their business is because they wear multiple hats, and many of them are mothers, and they're trying to figure out work that can support them also being present as mothers. So one example is there's a woman, she's right over the border in Chelmsford, and she has a salon, and she lives on top, and the bottom is the salon, and she has 4 children. She's an African-American woman, and like this is her life, and her kids are in and out of the salon, and you know, they all live above. And she's also started renting out chairs to support other business owners to start their own businesses. And so there's like community within her salon, there's family, and I think we see that a lot with many of our entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I was in a barber shop on Central just before pandemic time hit, talking to the barbers in there, not about business per se, but it came up. I was talking to them actually about barber shops and the Underground Railroad. We had this really fascinating conversation about how lots of barber shops in Lowell were operated by fugitives from the South who were escaping the institution of slavery. But then we got on into the business, and they were all talking the same way about how these are extended families, and what you said, renting, which I never thought about before, but you have a shop with 4 chairs, and on Saturday somebody might rent a chair because a certain barber had a following, and it would bring those people into the barber shop, and it was a way to sort of seed a smaller business, and then maybe they could get their own barbershop, you know, further down the road. But it was, I hadn't thought about it, but it's exactly like what you were describing.
We have another example similar to that. A woman, she's Cambodian American, and she's a beautician, and one of the things she does is eyelash extensions. And she rented a chair at someone else's salon doing eyelash extensions, and was doing really well for herself. And you know, she's a single mom, and she had really felt empowered that through her own business she had kind of uplifted her daughter and her out of poverty, but she didn't feel like that was enough, and she felt like she could do more. And that's when she connected with E4All, and she decided to build her own salon offering eyelash extensions. So it's an eyelash extension salon. Get ready, Bob.
Yeah.
And
I'm looking for a new look, so maybe
and what's I think fascinating about so many of the entrepreneurs within, especially I think within immigrant communities in places like Lowell, is for her building the business is not just to build a business to maybe make some more money, to be successful, to support her family, but she also sees herself as kind of a leader, and she has this responsibility. So she wants to employ other, you know, single moms who've been through her experience to give them a job, to help them out. And she now has 2 employees, and she was able actually through Jeanne d'Arc to get a PPP loan or she qualified for the PPP, and then she was able to help her employees get other assistance, and now they're back up and running and doing it in a COVID safe way. And so, yeah.
I mean, that's really the other thing that I wonder sometimes people in Lowell, if they make the connection that market basket, which we think of as market basket, but longtime Lowellians call it Demoulas. They don't call it market basket. Demoulas was a Greek immigrant. I'm not going to try to pronounce the Greek name. It's much longer than Demoulas. But that started out as one small market to serve the Greek community, and now people know of it as this incredible sort of enterprise. Anton's Cleaners the same way. That was Antonopolis. That was a small cleaner on over near me on Bridge Street that he established after working for years as a sewer in a tailor shop, and then he eventually opened a cleaners over on Broadway, right near where the sort of flagship is now. But those two are thought of as these very sort of Lowell businesses, but they were both started single, small, from scratch businesses. And I don't know whether people see that, whether when you're working with your clients, they know some of that history and see that as inspiring in any way, or do they have role models or people they aspire to by thinking of this history?
Well, part of it, I think, is because I did have a professor who had me always think about that history, but we actually had Arthur Anton speak to the entrepreneurs this summer. So, and you didn't even know that. It's like you set me up you pitched me to hit the ball. But he, in particular, him and I had touched base because he's been a mentor before. And I think he really does see himself as giving back to the community because of his own personal history. But we had touched base, and he was sharing with me all that was happening with COVID and how they were managing it. And so I thought that it would be really helpful for folks who are earlier in their business lives to hear from him and hear, especially because he is their business is like a local celebrity. We think of it as this big business, but it's run by people and it started small. And so it was really, I think it was inspiring for them to hear from him. And similarly, now that we've been running this program for, almost 8 years, we are able to draw on businesses that participated 8 years ago. And so when we had our showcase and celebration, we had a woman who started a yarn business, and she's a Black woman who started a yarn business called Lady Dye Yarn. And she really she's got a couple employees, and she's really had this steady growth. And she's talked about sort of how she's infused her values into her business and used her business as a vehicle for social change, and lots of inspiration.
I mean, Arthur Anton's grandfather, who started the business way back when, once that business got established, he went onto the board of the International Institute. And for the same reason that you said, Arthur met with your class because he felt like giving back. His grandfather was the same way, and he ended up on the board of the Institute for many, many, many years, and he felt the same sort of affinity with helping newer people coming into Lowell start businesses. So that's interesting sort of historical. That's why I like history. There's as much as it can be disturbing and depressing, you can find something good, right, about people, because I think when you scratch deep enough, you can get there, right? So that's fascinating. Wow.
I find this episode to be so uplifting and heartwarming, and it was almost like exactly what we needed, because and it made me think of our earlier episodes where we talked about the ingenuity and innovation of immigrants and refugees coming to Lowell and integrating their skills and everything that they know into our community and making it what it is today. And the fact that E4All is still doing that and just uplifting people, right? Helping them with their business, and then they go and help other people and build more community. And that's what I think of when I think of Lowell. I think of community and collaboration. Well, that's what I would like to always think of. It's not always what I think of, but today that is what I'm thinking.
No, and it's the important side of the city. I remember doing, like several years ago, doing a project where, because there had been so much anti-immigrant stuff going on in Lowell, this is probably 10 years ago, that maybe even a little longer. We wanted to figure out how many immigrant-owned businesses there were just in the downtown area of Lowell. And so we got some grant money, and one summer we hired a bunch of Lowell High kids who spoke the different languages of the downtown to go around the downtown and knock on doors and do these surveys with all these businesses. And when we got to around 350, we stopped because we said, okay, we've proven our point. And we created this database and map of where all these businesses were, as a way to say to people, look, you're dumb if you think people are just coming and sitting, waiting to be fed. That's not what people are doing. We need to offer that help when people need it, but people are contributing. People are growing businesses, employing people, as Lianna said, in terms of the businesses that get started. And that is the future of the city. And to think otherwise is really just being, I don't like calling people dumb, but sometimes I feel like, God, if you don't drive around Lowell and see it, then you're just dumb. There's no other way to think about it. And it flows in history. So if you're a Greek and you go downtown and you go to the Olympia or, whatever, then you're in the tradition, right? And so if you look around right by the Olympia is Pinella, which is a Colombian small owned business that Lianna, I think you might have had something to do with, right?
Well, so, I mean, it's all, what they've done is, I think, really wonderful, but we had a pitch contest in Spanish, and not surprisingly, they won. And, I think hopefully we helped them get some, good buzz and marketing, but just seeing the way that they've built their business and really been creative, especially during the pandemic. I mean, one, the food is delicious, so everyone should go try the food, but they've been really creative. They've developed an app so you can order food and get it delivery or pick up, because they found that like Grubhub and some of these delivery services, they're just so expensive. They charge the business 30%, and then they also charge the customer delivery fees. So they wanted to cut the middleman out, and I've tested the app and ordered food, and it works perfectly. And then they've, built really beautiful outdoor seating and it's right on the canal. And they used pallets from Market Basket that they painted, and they planted flowers in them. And just seeing their success, just, I think, to Maritza's points, like, make me think of community and Lowell. And we had a woman who wants to open up a business, a restaurant specifically. So I said, go talk to the owners of Pinella. Before you even start to imagine what you want, talk to them, because they can give you some advice or feedback. And
they really revitalize that space that they're in too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful now. And it's welcoming, and Jeanne d'Arc's around the corner. It's like a They did not sponsor this episode.
But we may all, at some point when it's safe for me to get out there, we may all just want to go grab a bite there. I just wanted to thank you, Lianna, because seriously, when I say this episode is the one that we needed, this is what we needed today. And just to remind us all about the importance of community and how we can all uplift each other, and especially during hard times, and how that's a part of the history of the city, and how shopping local and supporting small businesses really helps all of us. So, and that's just, again, that's part of our history. So thank you, Bob, thank you, Lianna, and thank you all for tuning in. This has been History in Lowell.